The morning alarm echoed through the Earth Defense Force station orbiting Jupiter as Captain Jake Morrison reviewed the routine patrol reports. Nothing unusual had happened in the outer solar system for months, and Jake expected another quiet day of monitoring space traffic and checking asteroid mining operations. His coffee was still warm when Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez burst into the command center with her face pale and her hands shaking. "Captain, we have something big on the sensors," she said, pointing at the main display screen. "It's not like anything we've seen before." Jake set down his coffee and walked to the sensor station where Chief Engineer Tony Williams was already running diagnostics. The screen showed a massive object approaching from beyond Pluto's orbit, moving at speeds that should have been impossible for something so large. The ship was easily 10 times bigger than Earth's largest vessels, with strange curves and angles that hurt to look at for too long. "How long until it reaches Jupiter?" Jake asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "At current speed, about 6 hours, Tony replied, his fingers dancing across the control panel. "But sir, the energy readings are off the charts. This thing could power half of Earth just with its idle emissions." Jake activated the emergency communication system and contacted Admiral Susan Blake at Earth Defense Command. Her weathered face appeared on the screen within seconds, and Jake could see the worry in her eyes even before he spoke. "Admiral, we have a situation," Jake began, then explained what they were seeing. Blake listened without interruption, her expression growing more serious with each detail. "I'm sending additional ships to your position," Blake said. "Do not, under any circumstances, take aggressive action. We need to know what we're dealing with first." The next few hours passed slowly, as more human ships arrived at Jake's position. The mysterious vessel continued its approach, seemingly unaware or unconcerned about the growing human fleet. When it finally stopped just outside Jupiter's gravitational field, Jake could see its true size through the viewing ports. The alien ship was so massive it blocked out several stars. A new voice suddenly filled the communication channels, speaking perfect English with an accent that sounded like metal scraping against stone. "Primitive inhabitants of the third planet, I am High Commander Vexthara of the Zephyrian Galactic Empire. Your species has been evaluated and found suitable for incorporation into our domain." Jake exchanged glances with his crew before responding. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth Defense Force. We welcome peaceful contact with your people." "There is no negotiation," the alien voice continued coldly. "Your species will surrender within 30 of your planetary rotations. You will submit to Imperial rule, provide 60% of all planetary resources as tribute, and relocate 40% of your population to labor colonies throughout our territory." The communication channel went silent, leaving Jake and his crew staring at each other in disbelief. Tony was the first to speak, his voice barely above a whisper. "Did they just demand we give up half our people as slaves?" Back on Earth, President John Martinez stood before an emergency session of the United Nations, his hands gripping the podium as he addressed representatives from every nation. The alien ultimatum had been transmitted worldwide, and panic was beginning to spread through major cities. "Fellow leaders," Martinez said, his voice carrying the weight of humanity's future, "we face a challenge unlike any in our history, but we must remember that we are not the same species that once cowered before natural disasters or wild animals. We are humans, and we do not surrender easily." In the Advanced Research Facility beneath NRAD, Dr. Richard Hayes examined pieces of debris from a damaged alien probe that had been recovered near Mars several weeks earlier. At the time, they had assumed it was space junk from an old Earth mission, but now he realized they had been holding alien technology. "The power source is incredible," Dr. Richard muttered to his assistant, Kate Murphy, as they studied the strange crystalline structures. "But look at these circuit patterns. They're too organized, too predictable. It's like they built everything according to rigid rules." Kate leaned closer to the microscope. "What does that mean for us?" "I'm not sure yet," Dr. Richard replied, "but I have a feeling their strength might also be their weakness." Meanwhile, Ambassador Lisa Carter was preparing for what might be the most important diplomatic mission in human history. She had been chosen to respond to the aliens, though she knew her chances of success were slim. The Zephyrians had not sounded. Interested in negotiation? Request more time, Admiral Blake advised during their final briefing. We need every day we can get to prepare. Lisa nodded, understanding the desperate hope in Blake's voice. I'll do my best, but they don't seem like the patient type. As Earth's diplomatic transmission traveled toward the alien vessel, ordinary people around the world watched the skies with a mixture of fear and defiance. In New York, construction worker Mike Davis told his crew they would keep building because humans didn't quit. In Los Angeles, pilot Sarah Johnson volunteered for military service, along with thousands of others who refused to accept defeat without a fight. High Commander Vexthara received the human response aboard his flagship with amusement. The humans wanted more time to consider surrender terms, as if they had any real choice in the matter. In his long military career, he had conquered 47 species, and humans appeared no different from the others. Grant them their additional time, he told his subordinates. Let them waste their final days in false hope. It makes the eventual submission more satisfying. Field Marshal Krextal, Vexthara's second-in-command, reviewed the intelligence reports on human military capabilities. Their most advanced warships were primitive compared to Zephyrian technology, and their weapons could barely scratch Imperial shields. The strategic analysis computer calculated their victory probability at 99.7%. Shall we call for additional fleet support? Krextal asked. Unnecessary, Vexthara replied dismissively. These humans are weak and divided. Their leaders are already discussing surrender. We will defeat them with our current forces and save the Empire's main fleets for worthier opponents. As night fell on Earth, Dr. Richard Hayes made his first breakthrough in understanding alien technology. The quantum frequency patterns were incredibly sophisticated, but they followed mathematical rules so precisely that he could predict their behavior. If humans could create enough chaos in those patterns, they might be able to disrupt alien systems. Kate, look at this, he called excitedly. Human brainwaves are naturally chaotic. What if we could amplify that chaos and use it as a weapon? Unknown to the Zephyrians, humanity's greatest advantage was not their technology or their weapons, but something the aliens could never understand: the beautiful unpredictability of human nature itself. High Commander Vexthara stood in the war room of his flagship, studying holographic displays of human military assets with barely concealed contempt. The intelligence reports showed Earth's combined space fleets consisted of roughly 300 vessels, most of which appeared to be converted mining ships and cargo haulers with basic weapons attached. Their largest warships were less than half the size of a standard Zephyrian patrol craft. These humans call themselves a spacefaring civilization. Vexthara said to his officers, gesturing at the pathetic display, "Look at their weapons technology. Primitive chemical rockets and basic energy beams that could barely penetrate our auxiliary shields." Field Marshal Krextal nodded in agreement while reviewing tactical assessments. The strategic computer has updated its calculations, Commander. Victory probability is now 99.8%. The additional 0.1% comes from the possibility of equipment failure on our side, not from any human resistance. The Zephyrian command staff shared what passed for laughter among their species, a sound like grinding metal. They had seen the same pattern dozens of times before. Young civilizations always believed their primitive weapons and desperate courage could overcome superior technology and centuries of military experience. They were always wrong. Captain Jake Morrison received new orders from Admiral Blake as his ship, the EDS Defiance, prepared for a reconnaissance mission into the outer solar system. The mission was dangerous but necessary. Earth needed to know exactly what they were facing, and that meant getting close enough to the alien fleet to gather detailed intelligence. "We're going to use the asteroid belt for cover," Jake explained to his crew as they studied the mission plan. "Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez will coordinate our sensor sweeps while Chief Engineer Tony Williams keeps our emissions as low as possible. We need to see them without being seen." Amy checked her equipment one final time. The new passive sensors should let us scan their ships without giving away our position, but we'll have to get within 50,000 kilometers. That's practically touching them in space terms, Tony muttered. If they spot us, we won't have time to run. Jake nodded grimly. That's why we're not going to get spotted. The Ed's Defiance slipped through the asteroid field like a ghost, using the natural cover of spinning rocks and metal debris to mask their approach toward the Zephyrian fleet. Jake had chosen his crew carefully for this mission. Amy was the best sensor operator in the Earth Defense Force, and Tony could make their ship's engines run so quietly that even Earth's own sensors would have trouble detecting them. As they drew closer to the alien vessels, the true scale of the Zephyrian fleet became apparent. Jake counted 200 ships arranged in perfect geometric formations that spoke of military discipline refined over centuries. Each vessel bristled with weapons that could probably destroy entire cities with single shots. "My God," Amy whispered as her sensors revealed the energy output of just one alien dreadnought. "A single one of those ships has enough firepower to glass half a continent." "Keep scanning," Jake ordered, though his own confidence was shaking. "We need to know everything." Meanwhile, back on Earth, Dr. Richard Hayes was making remarkable progress in his underground laboratory. The alien technology fragments revealed secrets about Zephyrian science that both impressed and concerned him. Their quantum computing systems were far more advanced than anything humans had developed, but they operated on principles that seemed almost mathematical in their precision. "Look at these pattern matrices," Dr. Richard explained to Kate Murphy as they studied the alien circuits under powerful microscopes. "Every single connection follows perfect mathematical rules. There's no randomness, no chaos, no room for improvisation." Kate frowned at the data. "That sounds like it would make their systems incredibly efficient." "It does," Dr. Richard agreed, "but it also makes them predictable. Watch what happens when I introduce a random electromagnetic pulse." He activated a small device that generated chaotic electrical patterns similar to human brainwaves. The alien circuit fragment immediately began malfunctioning, its perfect patterns disrupted by the random interference. "It's like their systems can't handle anything that doesn't follow their rules," Kate observed with growing excitement. "Exactly," Dr. Richard said. "And human neural patterns are naturally chaotic. We might have found their weakness." General Pete Collins arrived at the laboratory just as Dr. Richard was documenting his discovery. The general had been tasked with preparing Earth's military for a war they couldn't win through conventional means, and he desperately needed any advantage they could find. "Doctor, tell me you have good news," General Collins said, his weathered face showing the strain of the past few days. Dr. Richard explained his findings about the vulnerability in Zephyrian technology. "If we can build weapons that amplify human neural chaos, we might be able to disrupt their targeting systems and shields." "How long would it take to build such weapons?" the general asked. "Working around the clock with every facility on Earth." "Maybe 2 weeks for prototypes," Dr. Richard replied. General Collins activated his communication device. "This is Collins. I need every military research facility on the planet to report to Dr. Richard Hayes immediately. Authorization code Alpha 77. The Zephyrians continued their slow advance through the solar system, confident in their overwhelming superiority. High Commander Vexthara had intercepted several human communications discussing possible surrender negotiations, which only reinforced his belief that these creatures were weak and frightened. "The humans are already talking about giving up," he reported to the Galactic Council via long-range transmission. "This conquest will be completed ahead of schedule with minimal resource expenditure." Field Marshal Kreckstall reviewed the latest intelligence reports with satisfaction. Several of their leaders are publicly discussing the futility of resistance. Their military commanders appear to be preparing for ceremonial surrender rather than actual combat. What the Zephyrians didn't realize was that the communications they had intercepted were deliberately misleading. Admiral Blake had ordered fake surrender discussions to be broadcast on frequencies she knew the aliens were monitoring, While the real military preparations continued in absolute secrecy, Captain Jake Morrison and his crew completed their reconnaissance mission and returned to the inner solar system with valuable intelligence about Zephyrian fleet positions and capabilities. The information was sobering. The alien ships were even more powerful than Earth's worst estimates, and their defensive systems appeared nearly impenetrable. "We're going to need a miracle," Amy said as they transmitted their findings to Earth Defense Command. "No," Jake replied. Thinking about the courage he had seen in ordinary humans during the past few days, "We're going to need to be human." The Zephyrians made their final preparations for what they expected to be a simple mop-up operation. High Commander Vextara divided his fleet into 3 groups, planning to surround Earth and demand immediate surrender. He allocated only junior officers to lead the assault, considering it good training for future campaigns against more worthy opponents, unknown to the aliens. Dr. Richard Hayes had just completed the first successful test of a chaos field generator, and General Collins was coordinating the secret deployment of these experimental weapons across Earth's hidden defensive positions. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shatter the Zephyrian Empire's understanding of warfare itself. The red alert sirens echoed through every Earth defense force station as the Zephyrian fleet crossed Mars orbit and began their final approach toward Earth. Admiral Susan Blake stood in the main command center, watching the tactical display show. 200 alien vessels arranged in perfect attack formations. Her own forces looked pitifully small in comparison, but she had learned not to judge battles by numbers alone. "All units, this is Admiral Blake," she announced over the fleet communication system. "Operation Longshot is now active. Remember your training and trust in the new equipment? Today we show these aliens what humans can do when we fight for our home." Captain Jake Morrison gripped the command chair of the EDS Defiance as his ship led the first wave of human defenders toward the approaching enemy. The chaos field generators that Dr. Richard Hayes had developed were now installed on every human vessel, though they had only been tested in laboratory conditions. Nobody knew for certain if they would work in actual combat. "Chaos generators online," reported Chief Engineer Tony Williams from the engine room. "Energy patterns are reading normal, but I'm seeing some strange fluctuations that weren't in the simulations." "Those fluctuations are supposed to be there," Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez explained from her sensor station. Dr. Richard said the more random our emissions become, the better they'll work against alien systems. Jake activated the ship-wide communication system. "All hands, prepare for engagement. We're about to find out if human unpredictability is really stronger than alien technology." The first contact between the fleets occurred near the orbital path of Mars, where Jake's squadron encountered a Zephyrian patrol group consisting of 12 heavy cruisers. The alien ships immediately opened fire with weapons that could melt through asteroid-sized chunks of metal. But something unexpected happened when their targeting computers tried to lock onto the human vessels. High Commander Vextara watched the engagement from his flagship with growing confusion. His ship's targeting systems were reporting multiple conflicting readings for each human vessel. The computers couldn't decide whether the enemy ships were in one location or another, causing the weapons to fire at empty space while the actual targets continued their attack runs. "What is causing this malfunction?" Vextara demanded from his weapons officer. "Unknown, Commander," the officer replied, frantically checking system diagnostics. "All equipment appears to be functioning normally, but the targeting computers are receiving interference from an unknown source." Jake's ship fired its first salvo of missiles at a Zephyrian cruiser, and the crew watched in amazement as the aliens' defensive shields flickered and failed. The chaos field generator was working exactly as Dr. Richard had predicted. The random electromagnetic patterns generated by human neural activity were disrupting the mathematical precision that Zephyrian technology required to function properly. "Direct hit on their primary shield generator," Amy reported with excitement. "Their defensive systems are completely down." The Zephyrian cruiser tried to retreat, but Tony had already calculated its most likely escape route using the kind of intuitive guesswork that human engineers specialized in. The Ed's Defiance intercepted the alien vessel and destroyed it with CONV and TIO and AL weapons while its shields remained offline. Similar scenes played out across the battlefield as human ships used their chaos generators to devastating effect. Commander Rachel Stone led a squadron of experimental fighters equipped with enhanced chaos field projectors, and her pilots discovered that the more erratically they flew, the harder it became for alien weapons to track them. "This is incredible," Rachel reported to Fleet Command as her fighters danced through enemy fire without taking a single hit. "It's like they can't predict where we're going because we don't know where we're going ourselves." Lieutenant Carl Johnson, flying as Rachel's wingman, managed to destroy an entire Zephyrian destroyer by using what he later described as the stupidest attack pattern I could think of. His ship corkscrewed through space in a spiral that violated every principle of tactical flying, but the alien targeting computers couldn't calculate a firing solution for something so apparently random. The Zephyrian fleet began to withdraw after losing 37 ships in the first engagement, something that had never happened in their military history. Field Marshal Krextall sent urgent reports back to the Empire while trying to understand what had gone wrong. "The humans possess some form of technology that interferes with our targeting and defensive systems," he reported, requesting immediate tactical analysis and additional fleet support. High Commander Vexthar refused to believe that primitive humans could possess technology superior to Zephyrian science. "These are equipment malfunctions, nothing more. We will adjust our approach and continue the assault." Back on Earth, Dr. Richard Hayes was working with scientist Kate Murphy to develop even more effective applications of chaos field technology. They had discovered that human creativity itself could be weaponized by building adaptive systems that became more unpredictable when under stress. "Look at these readings," Kate said, pointing to her computer screen. "When we put the chaos generators under simulated combat stress, their output patterns become even more random. It's like the technology is learning to be more human." Dr. Richard nodded with satisfaction. "That's exactly what we want. The more chaotic our systems become, the more problems we'll cause for alien technology that requires mathematical precision." Meanwhile, civilian engineer Mike Davis was leading efforts to retrofit commercial spacecraft with chaos field generators. Cargo haulers, mining ships, and even luxury yachts were being converted into auxiliary warships. The Zephyrians had expected to face a small military fleet, but humans were turning their entire space-based civilization into a weapon. "We don't have enough military ships to win this war," Mike explained to his team of volunteer engineers, "but we have thousands of civilian vessels that can be modified. Every cargo ship becomes a potential warship when equipped with chaos generators." The Zephyrian Empire committed additional resources to the Earth campaign, bringing their total fleet strength to 500 vessels. High Commander Vexthara was determined to crush human resistance before word of their initial defeats could spread to other species under Imperial rule. "We will overwhelm them with sheer numbers," he declared during a strategy meeting with his commanders. "No amount of equipment malfunction can save them from a properly coordinated assault by our full fleet." Field Marshal Krextall privately began to doubt whether they were dealing with simple malfunctions, but he kept his concerns to himself. The Empire did not tolerate officers who questioned official explanations, especially when those explanations came from High Commander Vexthara himself. As the larger Zephyrian fleet approached Earth's orbital space, Admiral Blake prepared for the battle that would determine humanity's fate. She had fewer than 400 ships to face 500 alien vessels, but she also had something the Zephyrians couldn't understand: the complete unpredictability of human nature in desperate circumstances. "All units, prepare for full engagement," Blake announced as Earth appeared in the viewports behind her fleet. "We're not just fighting for our planet. We're fighting to prove that chaos can be stronger than order, that creativity can defeat rigid thinking, and that humans never surrender when we're protecting our home." The massive Zephyrian assault fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system like a metallic storm cloud, 500 vessels strong and arranged in the most precise battle formation their military doctrine could devise. Hi. Commander Vexthera stood on the bridge of his flagship, confident that overwhelming numbers would finally crush the troublesome humans who had somehow managed to damage his advance forces. "Begin the final assault," Vexthera commanded, his voice echoing through the communication systems of every ship in his fleet. "These primitives have caused enough embarrassment to our empire. Today we end their resistance permanently." Admiral Susan Blake watched the approaching enemy fleet from Earth's orbital defense station, her experienced eyes counting the alien ships with grim determination. The numbers were even worse than her worst projections, but she had learned something important during the previous battles. Humans fought differently when their backs were against the wall. "All defensive positions implement scatter pattern Delta," Blake ordered. "Do not, under any circumstances, allow them to predict our movements or concentrate their fire effectively." Captain Jake Morrison received his orders aboard the EDS Defiance, and immediately began coordinating with the other human ship commanders. The plan was insane by any normal military standard, but normal military standards had never included chaos field generators and human unpredictability as tactical weapons. "We're going to use the asteroid belt, Jupiter's moons, and even Earth's own satellites as cover," Jake explained to his crew. "The aliens expect us to meet them in open space like civilized warriors. Instead, we're going to fight like cornered animals." Chief Engineer Tony Williams had made further modifications to their chaos generators based on combat data from the previous engagement. "The new settings will make our emissions even more random," he reported. "I've basically told our computers to think like humans having panic attacks." Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez coordinated with Earth's newly deployed satellite network, each one equipped with miniature chaos field projectors that Dr. Richard Hayes had designed. "We're turning our entire orbital infrastructure into a weapon," she said with satisfaction. The battle began near Europa, where Commander Rachel Stone led her fighter squadron in the first wave of attacks against the Zephyrian advance guard. Her pilots had been practicing something they called creative flying, which involved deliberately making the worst tactical decisions possible while still somehow remaining effective in combat. "Remember, fly like you're drunk and angry," Rachel told her pilots over the communication system. "The more irrational we are, the more problems we cause for their targeting computers." Pilot Sarah Johnson demonstrated this principle perfectly during her attack run on a Zephyrian battlecruiser. She flew her fighter in a pattern that resembled a three-dimensional figure 8 crossed with random spirals, while simultaneously firing her weapons at targets that logic said she couldn't possibly hit. The alien ship's defensive systems tried desperately to calculate her trajectory, failed completely, and shut down from computational overload. "Their shields are down," Sarah reported cheerfully as she destroyed the cruiser with a single missile. "Apparently their computers gave up trying to understand what I was doing." The Zephyrians found themselves facing a type of warfare that violated every principle in their military handbooks. Human ships appeared from behind asteroids, fired weapons while spinning randomly, used gravitational slingshots around planets to achieve impossible velocities, and generally behaved like their pilots had lost their minds. Field Marshal Krextall watched his carefully planned formations fall apart as human vessels refused to fight according to any recognizable pattern. "They're not following any tactical doctrine," he reported to High Commander Vexthara. "Our strategic computers cannot predict their movements because their movements appear to have no logical basis." "Impossible," Vexthara replied angrily. "Every military action must have tactical reasoning behind it. Find the pattern and exploit it." Meanwhile, on Earth, Dr. Richard Hayes was implementing his most ambitious project yet, the Neural Cascade Amplifier. This device would take the natural chaos of human brain patterns and broadcast them across entire star systems, creating interference fields that would disrupt Zephyrian technology on a massive scale. "This is either going to save humanity or give everyone on Earth the worst headache in history," Dr. Richard explained to Kate Murphy as they activated the prototype system. Kate monitored the energy readings as the amplifier came online. "The chaos field is spreading beyond Earth's orbit," she reported. We're basically turning human consciousness into a weapon of mass disruption. The effects were immediate and devastating for the Zephyrian fleet. Ships that had been functioning perfectly suddenly found their navigation systems reporting impossible locations, their weapons firing at targets that didn't exist, and their shields randomly activating and deactivating without any input from their crews. Hi. Commander Vexthara's flagship began spinning slowly as its orientation systems tried to determine which way was up. "What is happening to our ships?" he demanded, but his officers were too busy trying to regain control of their own systems to answer. The turning point came when civilian engineer Mike Davis led his converted cargo fleet into battle against a Zephyrian squadron near Mars. His ships had no military training, no tactical coordination, and no standard equipment. What they did have was the kind of stubborn human refusal to quit that had carried their species through every crisis in their history. "We're not soldiers," Mike announced to his volunteer crews over the communication system, "but we're humans. And humans don't give up when someone threatens our home. So let's show these aliens what happens when they pick a fight with a species that's too stupid to know when they're beaten." The cargo ships attacked in complete disorder, each captain making independent decisions based on whatever seemed like a good idea at the moment. Some rammed alien vessels directly, others used their industrial equipment as improvised weapons, and a few simply flew in circles while broadcasting human music at maximum volume to confuse enemy sensors. The Zephyrian military doctrine had no response for an enemy that fought with mining lasers, construction equipment, and what appeared to be pure spite. Their commanders tried to coordinate defensive actions, but their systems were overwhelmed by the chaos field emanating from Earth, and the completely unpredictable behavior of human vessels. Dr. Richard Hayes made his final breakthrough when he discovered how to reverse engineer Zephyrian technology using human intuitive problem-solving methods. Their science is based on mathematical perfection, he explained to General Pete Collins, but human science is based on making educated guesses and seeing what works. Lieutenant Commander Amy Rodriguez took command of the first human ships, equipped with hybrid technology that combined alien efficiency with human adaptability. These vessels could match Zephyrian firepower while retaining the unpredictability that made human tactics so effective. The battle reached its climax when Admiral Blake led a coordinated assault on the Zephyrian command ship using every principle of chaos warfare that humanity had developed. Human vessels approached from impossible angles, fired weapons that shouldn't have been able to penetrate alien shields, and generally violated every law of physics that the Zephyrians thought they understood. High Commander Vexthara watched his invincible fleet fall apart around him and finally began to understand the terrible mistake his empire had made. These humans didn't fight like any species he had ever encountered because they didn't think like any species he had ever encountered. They were chaos incarnate, and chaos was the one thing that ordered Zephyrian civilization could never truly defeat. The final battle erupted in Earth's orbital space as High Commander Vexthara made his desperate last attempt to salvage what remained of Zephyrian pride. His fleet had been reduced to fewer than 200 operational vessels, many of them damaged and struggling with systems that no longer functioned properly in the presence of human chaos fields. All remaining ships formed defensive positions around the command vessel. Vexthara ordered, though he could hear the uncertainty in his own voice, "We will make our stand here and show these primitives that the Zephyrian Empire does not retreat." Captain Jake Morrison led the human defense fleet aboard the ES Liberation, a newly commissioned vessel equipped with the most advanced hybrid technology that Dr. Richard Hayes had developed. The ship combined alien energy systems with human intuitive engineering, creating something that neither species could have built alone. "This is it," Jake announced to his crew as Earth appeared in their viewport, blue and beautiful and worth fighting for. "Today we prove that humans belong among the stars, not as slaves but as equals." Dr. Richard Hayes coordinated the final phase of his neural cascade project from the Lunar Research Station, where banks of amplifiers were broadcasting human consciousness patterns across the entire solar system. The chaos field had grown so powerful that Zephyrian ships were now experiencing complete system failures just from being in proximity to human vessels. "The field strength is beyond anything we projected," Dr. Richard reported to Admiral Blake. "Their technology simply cannot function in an environment this chaotic." Kate Murphy monitored the energy readings with amazement. "It's like we've turned the laws of physics into suggestions instead of rules, at least as far as their computers are concerned." Commander Rachel Stone's fighter wings had evolved their tactics beyond anything recognizable as military strategy. Her pilots now flew in patterns that defied not only logic but also basic physics, using the chaos fields to achieve maneuvers that should have been impossible. "I just flew through the middle of an enemy formation while spinning backwards and somehow didn't hit anything," reported pilot Sarah Johnson over the communication system. "I think their targeting computers are having nervous breakdowns." Lieutenant Carl Johnson added his own observation from his cockpit. "Their ships keep firing at where I was 5 seconds ago, even though I changed direction 3 times since then. It's like they're fighting ghosts." The breakthrough moment came when engineer Mike Davis discovered that civilian ships could use industrial equipment in ways that violated every principle of space combat. His converted cargo vessel used mining lasers to cut holes in Zephyrian hulls, construction robots to physically dismantle enemy weapons, and cargo manipulators to literally throw asteroids at alien ships. "We're not fighting a war," Mike announced to his volunteer crews. "We're doing construction work on their ships, except we're deconstructing them instead of building them." High Commander Vexthara watched in horrified fascination as a human. Garbage Scow somehow destroyed one of his heavy cruisers by ramming it while broadcasting what appeared to be human entertainment programs at maximum volume. The cruiser's computers had tried so hard to analyze the random audio patterns that they overloaded and shut down all defensive systems. "This is impossible," Vexthara muttered to himself. "How can chaos defeat order? How can randomness overcome precision?" Field Marshal Krextall finally voiced the concerns he had been harboring since the first engagement. "Commander, perhaps we should consider the possibility that we have fundamentally misunderstood these humans. They do not fight as we fight because they do not think as we think." The decisive moment arrived when Dr. Richard Hayes and his team achieved their greatest breakthrough: complete integration of human intuitive problem-solving with alien technology. Lieutenant Commander Amy Rodriguez commanded the first squadron of fully hybrid ships, vessels that combine the best of both species' capabilities. "These ships think like humans but fight like Zephyrians," Amy reported as her squadron engaged the enemy command vessel. "We can match their firepower while keeping the unpredictability that makes us so effective." The hybrid ships performed maneuvers that seemed to violate causality itself, arriving at their destinations before they had finished leaving their starting points, firing weapons that somehow curved around obstacles and generally behaving like physics was more of a polite suggestion than a binding law. Vexthara's flagship came under direct assault from Captain Jake Morrison's task force, and for the first time in his military career, the High Commander experienced genuine fear. The human ships moved like living creatures rather than mechanical constructs, flowing around his defenses like water around stones. "Sir, we're receiving communication requests from ships throughout the fleet," his communication officer reported. "Many captains are requesting permission to withdraw." "Withdrawal is not an option," Vexthara replied, but even as he spoke, he could see his remaining ships breaking formation and fleeing toward the edge of the solar system. The iron discipline that had held the Zephyrian military together for centuries was cracking under the pressure of fighting an enemy that made no sense. The final blow came when Admiral Blake led a coordinated assault that used every principle of chaos warfare humanity had developed. Human ships approached from all directions simultaneously, fired weapons in patterns that created beautiful but deadly geometric shapes, and somehow managed to synchronize their chaotic movements into something that resembled organized pandemonium. "All ships, concentrate fire on the command vessel," Blake ordered. "Let's show them what happens when humans work together." The combined assault overwhelmed every defensive system on Vexthara's flagship. Chaos fields disrupted his shields, unpredictable. Attack patterns confused his weapons, and the sheer audacity of human tactics left his crew struggling to respond to threats they couldn't understand. As his ship's systems failed around him, High Commander Vextara finally understood the terrible truth about the species his empire had chosen to challenge. Humans were not weak or primitive. They were something far more dangerous. They were genuinely unpredictable in a universe where every other species followed comprehensible patterns. "Send a message to all Zephyrian forces," Vextara ordered, his voice heavy with defeat. "Withdraw from human space immediately. We surrender unconditionally." The communication that followed was transmitted not only to the fleet but also to the Galactic Council and every species under Zephyrian rule. "This is High Commander Vextara to all Imperial forces. Our greatest mistake was challenging humanity. We assumed their chaos was weakness, but it was their greatest strength. They do not fight as we fight. They do not think as we think, and that made them impossible to defeat." President John Martinez accepted the Zephyrian surrender in a ceremony broadcast throughout the galaxy. The treaty granted Earth-protected status, guaranteed the independence of human colonies, and established humanity as a recognized galactic power with full rights and privileges. Admiral Blake was promoted to head the new Interstellar Defense Command, while Dr. Richard Hayes became director of the Department of Xenotechnology, dedicated to studying and integrating alien science with human innovation. Captain Jake Morrison received command of Earth's first deep space exploration vessel, the EDS Pioneer, with orders to seek out new worlds where human unpredictability could continue surprising the galaxy. The story concluded with Vextara in his private quarters aboard a ship returning to the Zephyrian homeworld, reading human military history and philosophy in a desperate attempt to understand how apparent chaos could prove so devastatingly effective against organized military force. His final log entry became famous throughout the galaxy. "Perhaps organization is not strength. Perhaps strength lies in the ability to be something your enemy cannot predict or understand. The humans have taught us that chaos, properly applied, can overcome any amount of order." Throughout the galaxy, other species began studying human culture with new respect and considerable caution, realizing that the unpredictable newcomers had changed the balance of power forever.